when we talk about the issue of black religion, we have to deal with the concept of holiness. All religions claim to be holy to some degree, to be manifested with a certain energy or a power to take individuals from where they are to where they need to be spiritually. But this concept of holiness is something that is often misunderstood by lay people, and it is a concept that religions, although they claim to be the embodiment of wholeness, are totally neglectful of. The root word for holiness is to be whole. So for a religion to be whole, that means it has to deal with the whole circumference of challenges that face black people. You can't just deal with faith. You can't just deal with belief. You can't just deal with money collection. You can't just deal with Bible or Quranic study. To be holy is to deal with the whole list of problems that black people have. Simply stated, in order to be holy, you have to be dealing with the spiritual as well as the political needs of African people. But we find with most black religions, they are not holy. They do not deal with the whole spectrum of problems that affect black people. They limit themselves to one thing: preparing you to die peacefully and preparing you for life in the afterworld. And as a result of that, black people are crying out. We are spiritually destitute, we are spiritually hungry, and we are spiritually impoverished. Because when we go to the church, when we go to the mosque, when we go to the temple, we're coming out feeling no better than we did when we went in. Of course, there's a temporary feeling of euphoria. There is an emotional high that surrounds black religion. And for a little while after the service, one might feel as if they benefited from it. But just like when an alcoholic is no longer being influenced by the alcohol, or just like a cocaine user is no longer being influenced by the cocaine, once the high wears off, black people find themselves that they're right where they were when they started. Now, the spiritual poverty is very, very major. And one of the reasons why we suffer such spiritual poverty in black religion is because black religion has severed all ties with ancient African spiritual practices. Black religion has cut the umbilical cord from its spiritual parent, which is the ancient African spiritual systems. When we look at religion and compare it to spirituality, Brother Curtis, we find that there's some very distinct features of spirituality that are not embodied in religion. And there's some very distinct features of religion that are not embodied in spirituality. For example, in religion, there's a concept of paying for forgiveness. When you read the Quran, when you read the Bible, when you study the culture of Christianity, the culture of Islam, and of course we know that the culture of Christianity is heavily influenced by European Christendom because they ruled the religion for so many years, and the same thing with Islam. It is heavily influenced by Arab culture because they have basically ruled the religion for so many years, which is another issue because you cannot separate religion. You cannot separate religion from the culture that groomed it. You cannot separate religion from the culture that groomed it. And unfortunately, the culture that grooms the religion tends to pattern the religion after its own cultural belief system. So as a result of that, in Islam, you see a degree of sexism that's even higher than the degree of sexism you find in Christianity because of the sexist nature of some, but not all, Arab cultures. Very important that we recognize that. Just like in Christianity, the imagery is totally European. Why? Because it reflects the culture that nursed Christianity from its dark ages, and that would be the European culture. But let's get back to some of these differences. In religion is the concept of paying for forgiveness, the concept of tithes. In Islam, the concept of giving 1/5 of what you earn to the church, okay, or the masjid, in an attempt to expiate some of your sins. There's all types of sayings in black religion that talk about how you have to pay your way out of sin. But when you deal with spirituality, money is irrelevant. money plays no role in spirituality. One may choose to spend their money for righteous causes, but the spending of money and the giving away of money in and of itself does not expiate one person from their sins. And unfortunately, we have a situation now where rich people have come to believe that they are sinless. How is it that so many rich people have come to believe that they are sinless? It's because they have been nurtured in religious systems that say the more money you give, the less accountable you are for your errors. So you have a lot of rich black people who are giving millions of dollars to churches in exchange for freedom from their sins, which couldn't be furthest from the truth, because both Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, all of these spiritual leaders who black people believe in and follow have argued repeatedly the point that it would be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven, which is ironic that we see so many black rich people who think they're going to heaven because they've given so much money away to the church, which is by design. Churches are businesses. Black people have a hard time accepting this. The masjid is a business. The Roman Catholic Church is a business. The Baptist Temple is a business. And most of the New Age black nationalist religions are also businesses. They exist to make money. And because they exist to make money, they always put features within the belief system that feeds the capitalistic agenda. Also in religion, we are taught that you have to find God. You must go on a search for God. But in spirituality, you simply are taught that you have to become aware of the pre-existing relationship you already have from the Creator. So there is no search for God because you are already one with God. You simply have to grow into the consciousness and awareness of your oneness with all that is, with your oneness with being, with your oneness with the supreme ruler of the universe. Now, the interesting things that religions do is they create a system where they put themselves between you and God. They put themselves between you and God, so the preacher becomes your attorney for God. The imam becomes your attorney for God. The temple leader becomes your attorney for God. Just like when you go into court, you need to have an attorney to argue your case to the judge, okay? Religion have set up the same sort of a judicial system when it comes to getting into paradise, where they teach you have to have an attorney in order to argue on your behalf to God that you have a right to the afterlife. And so the preacher is your attorney. The imam is your attorney. And they have very skillfully convinced black people that you have to belong to a church, you have to belong to a mosque, you have to belong to a temple in order for you to be on God's good side, which is interesting because most of these institutions, because they're not holy, many of them are not even on God's good side. So how in the hell is it necessary for me to belong to an institution that isn't doing God's work in order for me to be at peace with God? It makes absolutely no sense. Now, religions rule black people through the medium of fear. If you don't understand fear, you can't understand black religion. And this is another big difference between the ancient African spirituality taught by our ancestors and what is being taught in the church, in the mosque, and all other temples. And I refer to the church, I'm talking about all black religions, not just Christianity. But they use fear. They inoculate and intimidate their followers with fear. And this fear is so debilitating, Brother Curtis, that the fear takes over the common sense and intellectual process of black people to the point where you are afraid to do what? Question the nonsense that you are being fed. You are terrified about questioning a possibility that maybe Muhammad is not the prophet of God. You are terrified about questioning the possibility that maybe what you're reading in the Bible is not the words of Jesus Christ. You are terrified about questioning the possibility that maybe the name Allah is not the only name for God. Okay, maybe Jesus was not the only Son of God, but you're terrified. Why? Because the church and the mosque have taught black people that to question the doctrine, to become curious about the dogma, okay, is to earn God's displeasure, which means what? Religions are institutions of ignorance. And I know some of the listeners are going to have a hard time swallowing this pill, but in order for us to wake up, we have to get out of our paralysis of analysis. We are afraid to analyze the different systems and processes and leaders and behaviors that we see amongst the race. And in order for us to get from where we are to where we need to be, in order to make material progress, political progress, spiritual progress, economic progress, we first have to make intellectual progress. We have to improve our ability to think and think deeply about everything. And one of the things that we have to analyze is how religions function by way of the ignorance of its followership. Simply believe what I'm telling you. Don't question it.